Recording in
All right.
progress.
Well, we have a quorum here, so let's begin our meeting. Nice to see everybody. We can start with the clerk report. Thank you so much, Sarah, for stepping in and doing a great job with minutes last month.
Yep, hope they're okay.
So we can take a motion to approve and second, and then we can be sure we've looked them over and add any comments we want. So would somebody motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. And a second? Mark, thanks. Okay, so I don't know if anybody wants to take a little more time and look through them, or if you feel all set. No comments?
No, it was great. Thank you, Sarah, for doing that.
All right, great.
Thank you, Sarah.
Great. So with no comments, we can just take a motion to approve them. I mean, we have a motion, so I guess we vote it. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes of last meeting? And any opposed? Great. Thanks so much again, Sarah. Okay. Next on our agenda is a Hopkins report. I don't have anything from Hopkins to report. So let's move on to old business. And I understand that Margaret and Pat had a meeting relative to our survey work with Chief Mason.
Did, and I've agreed to do the report. This was a Hadley work group discussion on the Uniform Data Citation Analysis Report. We met on March the 17th from 4 to 6 p.m. in the Senior Center. Margaret and I had been invited by Chief Mason to serve on this work group. Each of us had gotten to know him in advance of his conversation that he had with the CDI. And also Jane was present too, I think, representing the select board. There were representatives from all the town offices at the meeting, Town Hall senior staff, Board of Health, Hadley Learns, Fire Department, Human Resources, Hadley Media, and then Margaret and me. And Chief Mason had invited us to objectively review and discuss the findings of the report that came out on February the 7th from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, referred to as the EOPSS, that described baseline data analysis of police stop data from February 2020 through December 2020. And note, this was a COVID period. So that was the period of COVID. I imagine everyone probably saw the articles, the media that was that covered this story, but just by way of refresher, the data came from the RMV. Salem State and Worcester State University conducted the analysis. They ended up analyzing data of agencies that conducted more than 100 traffic stops, which is 80% of the 350 agencies in Mass. And that ended up being 280 police agencies, including Hadley. The goal of the baseline data analysis was to examine possible racial disparities in traffic stops and to gain insight into potential patterns. The research analysis was based on this theory, referred to as the Veil of Darkness, or the VOD test, developed by two statisticians, Jeffrey Groger and Greg Ridgway. Hi, Wayne.
Hi.
Who are both academics. Greg was, at the time that this theory was developed, the chair of the Safety and Justice Program at the RAND Corporation, and he's currently a professor of statistics and data science at the University of Pennsylvania. And Jeff is a professor of urban policy at the University of Chicago. So this VOD test has been used by police departments across the country, and it was used by the Commonwealth in this particular analysis of data. And it's sort of a simple hypothesis that assumes that at night, during this veil of darkness, a police officer has greater difficulty determining the race of the driver before making a traffic stop. Conversely, during the daylight, an officer can more easily determine the race of a driver before making a traffic stop. So they concluded that if an officer was looking to discriminate, he or she could do so more easily during the daylight. So in that Commonwealth study, 2020 study, researchers found statistically significant data to suggest that non-white drivers were more likely to be stopped during the day, and 3 police agencies, Hadley being one of them. This data was reported on February the 7th and subsequently was reported with some cautions. The research team acknowledged the data was not perfect, that it didn't prove anything. They cautioned readers to that not conclude that racial profiling did occur. Could be a variety of explanations other than officer bias, and also concluded that this baseline data should be used as a starting point. So Chief Mason made a statement immediately following the release. He stated that we look forward to discovering more about how this study was conducted, and he will approach this with an open mind to understand and learn from it. And then 2 days after that, Chief Mason reached out to Margaret and to me to ask if we would be willing to serve on this work group. As I said, the work group met on March the 17th for 2 hours in the Senior Center. Chief Mason delivered a very, very comprehensive 43-slide PowerPoint presentation. And I think it's fair to say that his presentation demonstrated that he and the other members of the Hadley Police Department studied the report and the data in great depth, engaged and consulted extensively with the researchers at Salem State, law enforcement and colleagues in criminal justice, including a criminal justice professor in New York, and probably very importantly, dedicated enormous effort and department resources to gather data from the study, replicate the stop data. He was privy to more data, of course, in the town of Hadley, and so he was able to actually determine the exact time that the stops were made. And then he also provided camera footage of traffic stops in high-speed areas. So he provided all that at the meeting. And I think it's fair to say that I think those of us present could clearly see that he's invested in using these data, as he said, to learn and improve, and most importantly, and he emphasized this, to ensure bias-free policing in the town of Hadley. And he again said he's very interested in objective and honest feedback. And to that end, he requested that every person in attendance at the meeting complete an anonymous electronic survey of 10 questions related to his presentation. And he's going to use these anonymous responses to further inform his work. He also reported at that meeting that he intends to engage in additional meetings with members of the Hadley community, business owners, religious establishment like the Hampshire Mosque, as well as with Senator Comerford and Representative Carey. I guess just in conclusion, I don't want to speak for Chief Mason. I think he's in the process of examining all of this data and getting feedback from people. I'm just very confident in his ability to assimilate all this information and then to continue to engage with others, including the researchers, on these findings. I don't want to speak for him, but I guess I would suggest that we may want to invite him to a future meeting with us after he's had time to to review all of this data. You know, I appreciated being invited to be part of that. I think it's very important work. You know, it's important work for the country. And I just, I guess, want to say that I just really appreciated the tremendous effort he invested in. I mean, the report, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly, is 450 pages. The article that was written by the two statisticians is, I think, a 9-page article. 6 pages are statistics in that article. I mean, this is not, you know, in you know, my opinion, this is fairly complicated stuff, and I just feel like you know, Chief Mason is just really approaching it in exactly the right way, in my personal opinion.
Thank you, Pat. Did you say Salem State, and who was the other
The other
institution?
one was Worcester State, but I believe that the Salem State researchers are the individuals that he dealt with. Worcester State and Salem State.
Oh, thanks.
I'm curious to know, Pat, at that meeting, were community members of color present?
The people didn't self-identify. It looked to me like there might have been one individual of color at the meeting. You know, and that's a very, I mean, important point, Kayla. I mean, I think that we're having these conversations, you know, at mostly white tables. So I appreciate that question very much.
And I, you know, I don't say it with any agenda. I just say, for me personally, trying to do this work, I've found that I haven't found ways to diversify the spaces that I'm in.
Well, and you know, one of the things that Chief Mason talked with us about at the meeting that he had with us, and then he you know, again repeated at the meeting on March 17th is, and I think Jane, you mentioned this too, you know, Hadley is a predominantly white town. Hadley, however, is a bigger place that has a lot of diversity in the town, you know, people who travel through town, people who come to town. So we look at the residential population, it is, you know, overwhelmingly white. However, the experience of our town is much more diverse than you would think by just looking at the demographics of residents. I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but
I understand what you're saying. Sorry.
Wayne has his hand up.
I just observed that here, like everything we've tried to do since the beginning of this commission, having people of color step up to be a part of the deliberations is a very difficult issue for them and for us. And this committee hasn't yet found a way to bridge that. And I don't have any answers for that, but I just observed that this is like every other thing we've done and looked at. I don't know I don't have a solution to it.
Sarah?
I wonder, just responding to Wayne, if there's a way for us to use one of our meetings during the summer when we could be outdoors to invite members of, you know, anybody in town to come and join us and bring their thoughts, topics, questions, ideas. Here's what I'd love to see you guys do, anything. And, you know, to especially hope to hear from people of color, if there's a way to say that politely.
Well, the key would be finding a way to ask it that people can trust.
Right.
And I don't know how to do that unless we know people of color personally and are willing to reach out personally to them. I don't know. I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
I would say for anyone who's watching us on Hadley Media and has some thoughts about this and some insights, we're very, very eager to hear and learn. We feel a little stuck in that area. So if you're watching us and
Good. Yeah.
send feedback. Jane, please.
Well, I think our town, as many towns in New England, have a problem of proportions of occupants being mostly white. And when you look at the statistics of how many people will volunteer to do anything, and then you run that against a very small population of non-white, it's very hard to get those numbers up. So it's a different issue, I think, at one level.
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing I'd like to say about Chief Mason's report is the 3 towns that were cited are all similar to Hadley in the sense that they're small towns with a huge drive-through population. So Agawam with Six Flags, Foxborough with the stadium, and Hadley.
I thought it was Ludlow.
Ludlow. Well, Ludlow is where the, you're right.
Turnpike.
Turnpike exits.
Turnpike, yeah. And I was also struck by the data, and I thought I actually wrote this down, but Jane and Pat, maybe you can help me on this. I want to say there was some mention of an extraordinary number of people driving through town, up to maybe 100,000. Was that
1,000 a day on Route 9.
so? When you consider, and the other piece that that Chief Mason pointed out was that this was this was during COVID. So it was the 10 months of COVID, and the people who tended to be out on the road were essential workers. So you have a greater proportion of people of color on the road. So it was like, and I guess the researchers commented on that, but the point being that, I don't want to say it was a flawed report, but when you are taking a very specific period of time where automatically you are increasing the chances of people of color being out on the road than the general population or others who were much more privileged to be able to work at home. Then automatically we're starting with things not quite representative, and I, when he said that, it just struck me as like, wow, that's a big deal. The report did sort of acknowledge, in one sense, that they had to start sometime, someplace. And they were mandated to start, I think, that year. So it is what it is. But therefore, I feel like we have to look at this data very with a certain amount of scrutiny, because it's already skewed from the start.
I already, if I could just speak quickly, and then I'll pass the mic over to Jane. That just makes me that much more impressed with Chief Mason, because it is my first reaction to along the lines of what you're saying, Margaret, is to say, there are skewed numbers here, that because of Route 9, we're not a textbook situation, but it's all the better for him that he's not throwing excuses. He's saying, let's shine a light on this and let's investigate it. He may come out with the things that we're hypothesizing, but he's not starting there. He's saying, let's dig.
Yeah, it would be interesting to run the same data collection again now that more people are out and about. See if there's any difference.
Right. Jane?
So one of the things that he pointed out that I can't remember if I asked him or if he just pointed it out, but that the researchers from Salem State say there are no conclusions to be drawn from this data. Yeah. But the people from the Massachusetts Department of State Police or Police Surveys or whatever they're called wanted to make something happen. So they wrote, if you will, articles that would cause attention, newspaper releases.
Even the researchers themselves in that article state, if all things are equal, the comparison, the statistical comparison is done. And I think that, there might be other factors at play here. And I think that's what
says,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Jane, go ahead.
like Mark says, Chief Mason has really, I doubt that there's any other police chief in the state that has done what he has done in terms of figuring out what's going on in his department and
Yes.
what can be done to improve relationships.
I was very impressed with what he did. He's not pulling any punches.
No,
Well,
You
And
know,
he did it immediately. He really jumped on it. There's no hesitancy. Sorry, Margaret. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry for interrupting you. He did ask Salem State researchers, and they did respond that basically they said there are numerous limitations. This is a direct quote. There are numerous limitations of the data itself, including that it does not factor things in like driver behavior, does not include verbal warnings, etc. If data were available on verbal warnings, this may show different patterns. Further, since we are unable to tell neighborhood contextual effects, it might be that the stops are geographically similar or not. And then the veil of darkness analysis was emphasized because it's the best measure available, but reflecting on more stops outside of the ITP, which is that transitional period of twilight or dawn or dusk, might be useful too. So this is a clear path forward following the report's findings. That's from the report authors. So, I will say that the chief, the lieutenant, I mean, they pulled out all the stops and spent a good month just working to analyze all the data that they then pulled together and looked at things like, the verbal warnings and that sort of thing. So they actually pulled together a much more, it seemed to me, a much more comprehensive report than what Salem State presented, because they looked at the entire data set rather than just focusing on a certain, time of day.
Can I ask when and how you think the community will learn more about this material?
well, maybe Thursday with Hadley Matters at 3:00.
Can you say more about that, Jane?
Hadley Matters is a senior center program we do once a month, interviewing a town employee or someone of interest to people in the town.
Mm-hmm.
At the senior center, it's an open meeting. People are welcome to come and sit in the audience, and there's a question period afterwards. So I know he will at least touch on this in the interview.
Oh,
It
I
is
saw
not his
that-
focus.
So
It's
you're
a,
saying, just for the public that might be watching this, that
Yes.
this Thursday, which would be
the 5th,
the 7th
the 7th, sorry.
of April at 3:00 at the Senior Center, Chief Mason will be talking to the public.
Yes, and
Great.
it's open to the public, and there will be a question period.
Great, thank you. Okay, any final thoughts about the meeting with Chief Mason?
I would just say before we move on, I just again want to thank Pat for that great report. That was very comprehensive.
Great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is update on draft questionnaire for reporting and resolving allegation of discriminatory behavior. That's Wayne and Mark.
Yes, Wayne has jumped on it, and actually I did not, and I just found my list, and Wayne's already started some of my list, so I don't know. I'll let Wayne speak to it.
I can just say who I've reached out to and sent the letter that Mark did a great job of drafting. I've contacted the building commissioner, zoning enforcement, housing authority. That's all one office. Bill Dwyer, the planning board, Ann McKenzie, the school superintendent, David Zdonek, Board of Assessors and the principal assessor, the Conservation Commission, and the DPW. There's not been time to get responses from them, but we'll see who responds, and I'll report back in writing to the committee if you'd like that, or just wait till our next meeting.
Just so that we have this in our, excuse me, in our minutes, can you just restate what went out to those people?
The letter, let's see if I can find the letter.
I don't.
You
I'm
can
not
just
on the
summarize
computer.
it. Summarize is fine.
Just tell them what we're asking, what we're charged with finding out, and we're asking them if they could give us any information about. No, we're informing them that people are likely, when cases of discrimination come up, they are likely to contact us, and we're not the board to deal with those things. So we would like them to give us the contact information so that we can refer people to them should it fall in their area.
And I think we were asking them what systems they have in place to deal with any complaints about bias, discrimination, or grievances or prejudice.
Great,
Or perceived, all of those being perceived.
great. Thank you.
And we thank them for their service.
Right.
Great. Yeah, Pat.
Wayne, could you share a copy of that later with me and I can include it with the minutes? Would that be all right?
Sure.
A copy of the letter?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So the next agenda item is Juneteenth observation. The leaders of all of the churches, as well as the mosque in town, as well as the superintendent of schools and the library, to ask if any organizations had anything planned or were interested in partnering. I got two answers. The pastor at the North Hadley Congregational Church said, absolutely, North Hadley Congregational is in, more to come. I haven't heard anything back. And then Patrick at the library said that the library will be closed. It's a Sunday anyway. The library will be closed along with other town facilities. If we're interested in organizing a program or presentation, he can reserve space in the community meeting room. So that's as far as we've gotten. Sarah dug up some really lovely information about a couple of things happening in other communities, or that had happened in the past in other communities. And I was really struck by a social element of people gathering and people in the community sharing poetry or music. It sounded like these were brief gatherings. There was one in Dorchester and there was one in Marblehead. Sarah, did you want to say anything more about those?
Yeah, and I also looked at my scrapbook and found the bulletin articles about what Amherst is doing, which they've been doing this for a few years. So they have a whole day worth of speakers and music and food and just, art displays. And I guess this last year they had some Civil War tablets commemorating people who served, including members of the Black Regiment, the 54th. Yeah, and it moved around from the cemetery where some of those gentlemen were buried to the Common, to the North Amherst Mill District. So that's been developing for quite a few years, I guess, and they have a whole committee that just plans that event. So I don't think we are going to get to that level this year. But I loved Mark's idea of maybe if some of these, like the churches and the library and so on, might be able to show a movie that's educational, or some component like that. I think our focus this first year might appropriately be more towards education, just because Hadley is predominantly white and probably most of us don't know about this or are only learning about it now. And I'm hoping that by at least planning something and maybe culminating with some food and music on the common or something, maybe that helps to put the feeling out that we would be receptive to, the kinds of ideas that I was talking about earlier, come to a meeting, and maybe our open meeting in the summer is after that, so that people feel like, oh yeah, okay, these people would be interested in hearing.
I
Jane?
apologize.
I think
Jamie,
I saw
she-
Jane
Jane,
wanted to
Jane.
speak, and then Pat.
So yes, the day is on a Sunday, but the town is closed on a Monday. And that means if you want to hold something at the senior center, it could be arranged. If you go to the town common, you're required to have porta potties.
So maybe the senior center is a better place.
Exactly.
I like real bathrooms.
Not only real bathrooms,
Like,
it's easier parking. It's more
Yep.
for people with disabilities to get around. So it's a possibility, and certainly I will be in town and therefore can guarantee it will be open if you need it.
Great.
Thank you.
I wondered, and apologize if this was already discussed last meeting, but what about the diversity club at Hopkins? Would this be something that we could invite the diversity club to partner with us on?
That'd be great.
I would
wow.
I would be happy to reach out. Yeah, my go-to is always to get children involved. I was really touched, the Marblehead celebration that Sarah found. A young girl read a poem that was pertinent to the day, and I don't know if I'll take time to pull this up, but it was really lovely. And there was an acknowledgement also that the first slave ship that went from Massachusetts was built in Marblehead, and so the town acknowledged that. I would think that in Hadley, we have evidence of enslaved people who lived in our town, and maybe there could just be an acknowledgement, a public acknowledgement of that. Yeah, Mark.
Again, just trying to think outside the box, and this might be too non-PC or whatever, but I just had an idea that we could float, or you could just vote it down and say, that's nice, but no. What if we had, if we approached different store owners in Hadley and said, would you be willing to have a little sign next to your door and then a little blurb under it, so that the sign says, no whites allowed. And then you had a little story under it, to try and turn the table and make, since we are so white, make us, what it was like to go into a town and everything said no colors allowed. So, obviously it wouldn't be actually stopping their business, but it might get people to talk and think about it. I don't know.
I think that could really be taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting concept.
Kind of like performance art.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's fair to ask our local business owners to take on that social risk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a big chance.
No.
Maybe
Maybe it's not the business, but anyway, that was-
Yeah.
the
Maybe
It
it's
would
one
be
of
an
those-
interesting. It would be an interesting question to bring up to people in a educational discussion kind of format to say, think about what it would feel like if you, like went someplace and all the signs said you couldn't come in.
Yeah, Wayne.
The Porter Phelps Huntington House has a history that they have researched with slavery and might be a partner in this. They've sort of been closed down for their public things for a while, and they may want a reason to get more involved. So in our planning, we might consider that. Connecticut River Valley was a hub of slavery in the north, and the Porter Phelps family assigned the most unpleasant tasks on the farmstead to slaves and indentured servants. It's just a site that I just pulled up, and there's a lot more there, but that might be worth reaching out for.
Yeah, and the video that we watched in preparation for Hadley Learns last month, about some of the research that's been done for that. Yeah, I can send that link around again if people haven't got it.
Yeah, Jane.
And possibly getting Marla Miller to speak.
Right.
On a lot of this history. She's a Hadley resident.
What is her name?
Marla Miller. She's a research historian at UMass.
Yeah, she was the person that we met with last month with Hadley Learns and watched her talk before the meeting. Mhm.
So I can imagine a gathering at the senior center. I could also, Porter Phelps Huntington, if they're interested, they have a lovely outdoor space for gathering. I can imagine that as a central point.
Summer bugs are kind of hard up there. Sorry. I just come from the mosquito opt-out committee.
For me,
that's why you're so valuable. You pull in so many things from so many places.
Little reality
I'm so
check.
proud of all of my committees. You're all doing things. It's really exciting.
Good.
I'm willing to continue the spearheading of this to make I'm willing to be responsible for making something happen.
Yeah.
Taking people's ideas and stay in touch. Sarah sent such interesting stuff, and I appreciate that. And if you want to continue working with me on it, Sarah, and if anybody else wants to jump in and provide other thoughts and ideas, that's great. But
and
if we can find a time to meet, Kayla, I'll be happy to work with you.
Hey, I'll come upstairs after this meeting.
Okay.
It's hard.
And I just want to throw in one more thing, which is that we could, again, sort of outside the box, not every single piece of this necessarily has to happen on that day. The churches wants to show a movie, but that particular day, oh no, we can't because da-da-da. Make it the day before or 2 days before. I haven't even looked at the calendar. I don't know what day of the week it is or what's going on or other kinds of, oh, it's Father's Day or, oh, it's this or
it is Father's Day.
Whatever it is. If it's easier for Porter Phelps or for a church or for the library or whatever to have their piece of it hosted on an earlier day, let's just go with that.
There could be a flyer which listed 3 or 4 things that were happening in recognition of Juneteenth. Right. I love that idea.
And I mean, that might make it easier also for people to participate. Somebody might say, oh, I can't do 5 things in a row in one day, but I can do one of them on Monday and one of them on Tuesday and one of them on Wednesday or something.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Good idea.
Great
idea.
Maybe the businesses and the religious organizations, if we can do this in advance, could post that information. Yeah. Or include it in a bulletin or
last year the churches all rang their bells at a certain hour in group.
That would be good to have again.
Yeah. Great.
Jane, you mean that was here in Hadley?
Yeah, our church ran its bell. Yeah. First church.
Okay.
I'll volunteer to pay for some flyers if we wanted to print some flyers acknowledging the list of things that's going to be done, and we could put them up a month ahead. I'd be happy to donate the money to do that. If somebody else
can get press coverage. We can always get Scott Mersbach to write for us. Well, we write, he prints.
Great. All right, thank you. Any other thoughts? Under new business, the only thing that I had was, and we did reference this last meeting, but we really didn't do anything conclusive. Jane, what are your thoughts around increasing the participation in this organization? We've been a small group. We've been working at this together for a couple of years now, and I know I personally feel like we would benefit from some freshness in our group.
So you run against two problems. If you add more people to your committee, you need a bigger and bigger quorum every time.
Mhm.
What you really need is to somehow have meetings where people come that aren't necessarily on the board, if you will, and
Oh.
find out what's going to make that of interest for folks.
I think we've only ever had that happen one time.
And what was going on then?
Not sure if there was something specific that drew this person or if it was just, I want to know what's going on. Yeah, Pat.
I think it was one of our interviews, maybe with Chief Mason.
Boy, I don't
That's
even
true.
remember.
We did have some other people viewing some of those
did.
interviews.
You're right. You're right. We had a number of people attending those.
So that's the kind of thing you might do, and, just say, and we're always open for suggestions of things that would be interesting to you and to other members of the community, because we're limited in our resources of knowledge about what would be approved or liked, and let us hear from you.
And what would be the best ways to get that message out?
Well, Hadley Learns will start.
Do it at a high school sports event. That
and
always
hand
gets
out
coverage.
flyers.
That always gets coverage.
I don't want to get personal because I'm including myself, but we're all of a certain age, and I wonder, I think it would be lovely if you know what I want to say.
Yeah, but one of the things I have learned as I watch what happens in this town is people of our age, if you will, are mostly retired and have the time to do things, whereas people who have families and jobs and are running from thing to that and have to do the laundry and the shopping and get the car fixed and inspected and don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's our job to serve them and hopefully hear from them in some ways.
Yeah, hopefully hear from them.
And your suggestion about involving them in an event every few months or something like that, where they don't have to prepare for it, they're not responsible for anything,
Right.
but we can involve them in some way in a discussion. Right. I think that's the way. I think that's, it's important. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
How you make it exciting and want people to come when you're talking about, what do you do if you've been harassed? That's, it's not the sexy title you need.
Right. It's just thinking.
But
I think the things around June 19th and that kind of event, which they're not neutral, but they're more neutral than our usual business. And it's easier for people to step in, easier emotionally for people to step into something like that and to have an acquaintance than for other things. So I think that event and any other things we can think like that could help.
Food as an organizing principle. Just saying.
Always.
Yeah, Mark?
Have we asked Amy Lamham or the other gentleman from the Hadley high school if their students would have any interest in working with us for some kind of a Juneteenth?
It's on my list.
Okay.
Yep. Jason right now has COVID, and so, but I see him when he's not having COVID. I see him once a week, and would be happy to speak to him about it. But we can email him too. Don't need to do it then.
Glad to say I am recovered from COVID.
My guess is that Jason would be willing to get involved in some way. That's my guess.
I will reach out. Okay, open agenda.
I invite you all to the Climate Awareness Day on April 23rd that the Climate Change Committee is doing. It'd be at the Library and Senior Center from 10 until 4 with an incredibly powerful list of speakers and events. And they're all short enough that nobody's going to get bored for an hour in the wrong session. If you go on the Hadley Climate Change page and click on, you need to register. There's no fee, but we're limiting the number of people to 150. So please come. It'll be a fascinating event.
That's on the 23rd from when to when?
From 10 until 4.
Thank you.
The ending speaker will be Governor McGovern or Congressman McGovern.
I'm interested in that, but I may wind up going out of town that day. And I registered, but I don't know how to delete my registration if I wind up leaving and then giving that place to somebody else. I don't know.
Email me and I'll make it happen.
Okay.
And that registration you said is through the Senior Center website or?
No, through the Hadley Learns.
Oh, Hadley Learns.
HadleyLearns.com or Hadley Climate Day. Google that and it'll come up.
Okay.
And also this Saturday, there's a town-wide cleanup Hadley. If you want to register for it, you need to register in advance, but you can then get a trash bag and collect from anywhere that you've noticed that there's a lot of trash and take it to the dump free, basically.
Super.
And there'll be bagels.
Michelle, another open agenda item as we head towards May, when our next meeting is, should we plan to be a presence in the way we have been in the past at town meeting with a flyer that talks about who we are and what we do?
Yes.
I
Great.
think so. I'd like to see maybe we have a little flyer that has a little QR code so people could take their phone and go right to either our website or if we have a page with links to educational things that might entice them.
Perfect. Great. We can do that easily.
Now would that flyer be the that sort of report that we?
Your annual report of what you've done,
Well,
which
well,
is very impressive.
You know how we put all the things that we were doing? You know how I did that thing? Would that be?
That will be actually in the town book, which everybody
Good.
gets at town meeting.
Great.
Along with every other committee and department.
Great.
I would think it would be something more of a highlighting things and things to come, events that we're just sort of a snapshot of what we're doing and how they can get involved.
You
By
might
then
put
we'll
our-
have-
Go ahead,
by then
Karen.
we'll have plans for June, right?
Right. I was going to say we can publicize what we come up with for Juneteenth.
Yep.
might want to put our mission statement on there too.
Yeah, last year we did one that basically had what was on our landing page for the website, which is our mission statement and our membership and contact information.
And maybe we put a statement on there saying, we encourage you to come to our Zoom meetings, without strings attached, that you don't need to join. We want to hear from you.
Yep.
I'd like us to make it less committee-ish and more sparkly.
Right.
I don't want somebody to have to read something serious where they're going to pick this up. I think they're less likely to. So there's nothing wrong with putting out something about who we are, but I would say make it upbeat as much as we can.
Yeah, Pat.
go back to your earlier point about membership and then, having a presence at the town meeting. Is there a point in the year when we should re-up, get new members? I mean, is this membership for life until we decide not to? Is there any formal way that we reconfigure the committee? A point in the year?
Yeah, do we have to resubmit letters requesting appointment when the
Every
new,
year at the
the new
first
select board?
meeting, every year at the first meeting in July, the select board reappoints committees
Okay.
and they appoint whatever names are given to them. So if you have new people coming on and people leaving, you just give them the current list and that's what they do. That doesn't mean you can't change mid-year either, but that's the basic way that it's done.
So
So maybe we
between
should
now
all
and
draft
then,
up.
we could try to recruit some new people for the upcoming year.
Yeah,
My theory has always been if you're a volunteer somewhere, you can't leave till you get someone to replace you.
Right.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
so maybe that goes on our May agenda for June is we all draft our letters requesting reappointment.
Do we have to write those letters again or just send in the list of who's on the committee?
Just a list of who's on the committee. Once you're on it for life unless you get off.
Or if your name is Andy Morris Friedman.
That's a possibility. Hopefully he won't be chair again.
Hmm.
Okay. So our next meeting date is Monday, May 2nd. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
So moved, and a second.
And I'll second.
And all in favor?
Can't see me.
Aye.
My camera's frozen, but I'm voting yes.
Yeah, you are frozen, but
I don't know what happened. It just.
I won't be joining you for that meeting. I'll be away.
okay, well, have a great trip.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yes. Be well.